Here, Mike, why don't you tell us about your history on Sherman Street and your family's history?
The best thing I can say is my mother and father were on 10th Avenue about 40 years ago talking to a friend, and my father said to my mother, "Wouldn't it be nice to live down on Sherman Street?" My mother said, "You'll never live to see it. Put your ride in your pocket and go home." So sometime later, the guy, Keith, I think his name was, called my father and said, "Listen, there's a house on Sherman Street." So we got the house as fast as could be, and my father got his wish. So I've been here over 50 years, and it's always good to me.
And you bought it from we looked at the census.
Yeah.
Murtaughs.
Murtaughs had it. My mother and father bought it. I inherited from my mother and father with my sister Eileen, but she passed away, so I got it. And I think personally my parents got even. Because now I have to pay bills. Who pays bills? But no, I'm the landlord now, so I learned how to squeeze. I've got Lincoln screaming already. But I haven't been out in the neighborhood that much because of the working hours I had. But I'm very happy to see that they have these block parties. You see people and find out different things about them. I'm really surprised that some of these people did jobs. The fellow over here is International Natural History Museum. He's one of these bone specialists.
Right.
Wow.
You didn't know that? Yeah.
Didn't have a clue when he knocked me over.
Actually, his father did that before him.
Right.
Tom's father.
And you, being such a history buff, I never knew we had another history buff. Who knew? But this is what happens when you come out.
Right. You don't really know until you start talking to people. How did you get started with Civil War, being involved in that? Civil War, what do you call it, a recreator?
Reenactor. I was on the Avenue one time when the 14th Regiment, quote-unquote, was in the parade. So I asked them, could I get involved? They go, sure. They sign me up like that. So I've been involved with it over about 3 or 4 years or more, and we're trying to get the armory space that we should get, because the armory has the veterans group, we have a museum, we have a library, and we have a lot of veteran groups in there who are trying to help the veterans get their benefits. If they have a problem with the government, we have a guy there who goes in and cuts all the red tape and explains how it straightened out. Also,
so there's actually a museum in the armory, or you have a space there?
We have stuff from different wars and things like that. It's not quite organized yet because the city is working on redoing the whole place. So they've come in and they've gutted the place. So now they have also the YMCA, and they haven't signed the contract because they haven't got all the I's, dots, and T's crossed, but they're going to run the drill floor. Drill floor is now a multi-sports center. And then on the 15th Street side, they're going to use the offices. And we have the 14th Street side. So we have the offices, they have to be redone again. So we're just sitting here waiting for the city to finish them off so we can get on with our lives. But it's been a long struggle. Also, I'm involved with the Greenwood Cemetery searching out.
Yeah, I know, because it was interesting. I went over to 52nd Street to take a picture of a house that one of those veterans lived in.
Right.
And I was talking to a man on the block and said, "How long have you lived here?" And I was telling him what I was doing. He says, "Well, I've been here a long time," and I think he said he moved from Baltic Street. His father bought the house. He says his father just passed away, in his 90s. And he said when he went to the cemetery in Greenwood, he couldn't believe it because there were all these pictures that they've put by the Civil War. What did they actually do? I know they did research to find out where a lot of these guys were buried, right?
Yes. They have old records of people who were buried in the cemetery. We went through the old record to find out if they fit the profile for Civil War and to see if they died of Civil War wounds or of other things. We would write it down on a piece of paper, and then they would actually go out on the field and see if they could find the headstones and put markers on them. And then when they checked the record to see if the headstone was there, they sent them to the government, and the government made headstones. And now they placed the headstones over the bodies of those who were killed in the Civil War. And the approximate numbers I've heard 4,000 soldiers.
Wow.
I think they found so far maybe 2,000, and they keep looking. And this project has gone on longer than the American Civil War. So they are still looking for other people to see if they can find and put a headstone over them.
Because the ones that were there were all worn out. They were those flat ones, or
All worn out, fell over. They found one headstone that had fallen over, and they dug it up, and it was in pristine condition. And they other had people where fathers and sons were killed. They buried next to each other. That the headstones. They have one of two strange things. The Confederate general who left the South after the war and did the most unthinkable thing. He came north and married a Yankee. He died, and they buried him in Greenwood Cemetery, and they wouldn't put his rank or his name or whatever, anything connected to the Civil War on the headstone for fear that they would get revenge. But there is a couple of Confederate generals buried in Greenwood Cemetery with no names.
So, now, why were so many Civil War vets buried there? Did they give special consideration, or did or private families just did decide because that cemetery was fairly new at that point?
I believe because it was available. And there are a number of people who were buried there who were in the draft riots and the riots that you may remember in New York.
Right.
A lot of people are buried there. So at that time they had a section for the paupers. They buried in the mesh section. And then the military came in and took a section and said, okay, this is for the military. So a lot of the people who were soldiers that buried there fought the Civil War, but don't necessarily come from New York. Some of them come from Jersey, some from Connecticut, but they were buried in there because the regiments are buried there, different regiments. And we've seen people who died of softness of the brain. I haven't a clue what softness of the brain is, but you read the record of people dying softness of the brain.
Really?
No idea what it is. It might have. I don't think it's the brain physically softened, but I think maybe dementia.
That's right. I was going to say that's.
But they have a number of diseases that have no connection. You can't understand unless you know what they're talking about.
Right. I think I took a tour once. I think this guy Richmond is this, right?
Yeah, he's the one running it.
Right, and because he was described, because when I went there, this guy Barnett Schechter was doing a tour of like a revolution,
right? Yeah,
talking about Battle Pass and stuff that a lot of the fighting took place around where the cemetery was.
And a lot of famous people. Doubleday, who started baseball.
Right, Leonard Bernstein is there.
Right, I've seen that. I went to see that headstone out of curiosity, and I thought it was going to be something elaborate.
Very simple, yeah.
Very simple, and you'd never know unless you pointed out to it.
Speaking of the gangs in New York, I think that guy, the butcher Poole, what was his name?
I can't think of his
first name. William. Is buried there, and I remember reading there was a big procession that followed him out there or something.
And they redid the stone. I don't think it should be, but anyway, they put a new stone on top of his grave.
He was nothing special. He was a real.
No, he was just a rebel rouser.
Right.
I want to make a lot of. He wanted to die 110% American. No such thing as American.
How does